Something shifted that night. Quietly, like the way summer turns to fall when you're not looking. I hadn't seen Michael in almost 6 months, not properly anyway. Sure, there were the occasional texts, the half-hearted, "we should catch up" messages. But life got in the way. Or maybe I did. Maybe it was easier to keep some distance than risk noticing the things I wasn't supposed to feel. But then he messaged out of the blue. "Heading to town this weekend. Mind if I crash at yours?" Of course I said yes. Michael and I had known each other since we were kids. Mud-stained sneakers, comic book swaps, backyard sleepovers. He was the kind of person who made people feel like the center of gravity in any room he entered. Athletic, charming without trying, always laughing with this lazy, crooked smile that made my stomach flip for reasons I never admitted out loud. Not even to myself. I cleaned the apartment more than necessary before he arrived. I told myself it was just because it had been a while since I'd had a guest. But folding the spare blankets, setting up the futon in my room, making sure everything looked presentable, it felt like I was preparing for something else, something I wasn't ready to name. He arrived just after sunset, dragging his duffel bag and smelling faintly of cedarwood and airport terminals. That smell hit me harder than I expected. "Damn, you got taller," he grinned, giving me a hug that lingered for half a second too long. Or maybe it was just me that held on. Or maybe I shrank. Life in the city stunts your growth. His voice hadn't changed, but it hit different now. Deeper, maybe. Or I was just listening harder. We fell back into rhythm so easily. Pizza on the coffee table, mindless movies, playing while we talked over them, filling in the gaps time had left. The way he leaned his elbow on the back of the couch, his thigh brushing mine when he shifted. The way his eyes flicked to me when I laughed. All of it felt like home and danger wrapped in the same breath. As the night stretched on and the lights dimmed around us, I realized something quiet but undeniable. I didn't want him to sleep on the futon. Not because it wasn't comfortable, but because a part of me was tired of pretending that's all he'd ever been, my best friend. And something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way he looked at me like he was seeing something for the first time. Or maybe I was the one finally ready to see it. Michael and I met in 3rd grade after I accidentally pegged him in the face with a dodgeball. He cried, loudly, and I panicked and offered him my lunch as an apology. He took my sandwich, wiped his nose, and said, "We're even now." We've been inseparable ever since. Growing up, we were the kind of kids you'd always see together. Bike rides until sundown, half-finished video game campaigns, and long summer nights lying on the roof, talking about what we'd be when we were older. He wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be an artist. We made pinky promises to never lose touch, even if the world got in the way, and for the most part, we kept that promise. College was the first time we ever really spent time apart. Different cities, different majors, but every break, every holiday, we somehow found our way back to each other. It always amazed me how easy it was. Like no time had passed, like we were still those kids with scraped knees and shared secrets. "So, are you still hoarding ramen packets in your kitchen like some kind of soup dragon?" Michael asked, raising an eyebrow as he opened my cabinet. "Some of us are trying to survive a recession, Mike." He laughed, leaning against the counter with that lazy, familiar ease. "You're ridiculous. And you still label your mugs. Who labels their mugs?" "I don't want anyone drinking from my favorite one." "Oh, you mean the Batman vs. Godzilla one? That's your favorite?" He pulled it down and held it hostage like he always did, teasing but never cruel. "What does that say about your emotional state?" "That I like the classics. It was always like this. Effortless. The jokes, the comfort, the warmth. But lately the warmth had been doing strange things to me, the kind that made my hands tremble when he touched my shoulder. The kind that made my heart skip when his gaze lingered just a second too long. "So, where am I sleeping?" he asked, glancing around the apartment. His voice dropped into something casual, but there was a pause behind it. "I set up the futon next to my bed," I said, suddenly hyper-aware of how small my room actually was. "Didn't want to exile you to the couch." "Wow, the royal treatment," he said, smirking. "Sharing a room like the good old days." His words hit something nostalgic in me, but also lit up a quiet nervousness I hadn't expected. "You still snore?" I asked, hoping to sound playful. "You still talk in your sleep?" I flushed, because I actually did. And worse, sometimes, I said his name. He dropped his bag beside the futon, glancing around. "No pillow?" "Oh, crap, I thought I had. One here." I opened the closet and frowned. Might have left it at my parents' place last week. "No worries," he said easily, already kicking off his shoes. "We'll figure it out. I'll just steal one of yours." "Of course you will," I muttered, tossing him my extra. When he leaned over to grab it, his fingers brushed mine. Just for a second. A stupid, accidental touch. But it felt electric. I looked up, and for the briefest moment, he was looking at me. Really looking. His eyes flicked to my lips before he blinked and stepped back. My throat tightened. We didn't say anything after that. He changed into a t-shirt and gym shorts while I busied myself with adjusting the sheets. But even as we settled into our respective sides of the room, the silence between us felt charged, like a radio tuned just off station. A few minutes later, the rain started, light at first, then heavier, tapping steadily against the window pane. Michael rolled over on the futon, groaning. "Ah, crap, I left my hoodie in the car." "You want me to grab it?" "You? In the rain? Come on, I'll freeze before I let you do that." I hesitated. "You could borrow one of mine?" He raised an eyebrow. "You sure? I might stretch it out with all this bulk," he said, flexing dramatically. "Please," I said, tossing him an old zip-up. "It'll be good for your ego." He pulled it on, then turned toward me. "Smells like you." I didn't know what to say to that. And from the way he looked at me, just for a second, soft, unreadable, I wasn't sure he meant to say it, out loud. The power went out around midnight. At first it was just the lights flickering, the soft hum of the ceiling fan slowing into silence. Then everything cut off completely, plunging the apartment into a dense, muffled dark. The rain outside hadn't let up. It only seemed to get louder, steadier, like the universe wanted to make sure we noticed the sudden intimacy of the moment. I sat up in bed, blinking against the shadows. "You good?" From the futon, Michael groaned. "Did your building always do this during storms, or am I the lucky charm?" "It's not every storm," I muttered, grabbing my phone for the flashlight. "Just the special ones, apparently." I moved to the window and peered out. The entire block was dark, street lamps out, no headlights, just rain and silhouettes and the hum of a world asleep. "You cold?" I asked without turning. "A little," he said, "but I'll live." "Probably." There was something about the way he said it, half a joke, half something else. He was quiet for a second, then, "Unless you've got another hoodie. Preferably one that smells like you again." I turned, heart thudding, trying to laugh it off. "Weird thing to say." "Is it?" he asked softly. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could feel the smile. I threw a blanket at him, partly to hide my sudden awkwardness. He caught it, tugged it over his chest, and then, without asking, shifted from the futon to the edge of my bed. "It's stupid," he said, "but that thing creaks like it's going to collapse. I'll sleep on the floor if you want, just closer. To the window feels less like a horror movie." I could have told him to go back. I could have pulled out the emergency lantern and made a point of separating us again, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Yeah, no worries. He sat on the edge, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his arm. The room was dark, except for the pale blue glow from my phone screen, casting faint light on his face. His eyes looked different in this light, softer, vulnerable. Like all the layers of humor and bravado he usually wore had peeled back just a little. "I forgot how quiet it gets here," he said after a moment, lying back beside me. His voice had lowered, slower somehow, the way people sound when they're speaking into the dark. "It's weird. It's peaceful," I said, "when you're not thinking too hard." "I think all the time," he admitted, "especially lately." His arm brushed mine as he shifted. It didn't move away. I stared at the ceiling, aware of every inch between us, and more painfully, every inch not between us. My thoughts were a mess. The silence in the room wasn't empty. It was filled with things I hadn't said, with feelings I wasn't ready to admit, with every stolen glance over the years, every moment I told myself was nothing when it was clearly something. And here he was, inches away, wearing my hoodie, looking up at the same ceiling, breathing the same breath. My throat felt tight. "What have you been thinking about?" He was quiet, and I thought maybe he wasn't going to answer. But then he said, voice low, "I've been thinking about people. Connections, the ones that stick. How rare they are." I turned my head to look at him. He was already looking at me. "And I keep wondering," he continued, "why some people never really leave you, even when you try to move on. Why they're the first person you think about when something good happens, or something bad." The air between us felt suddenly too charged, too full. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. "Michael," I started, but my voice cracked, halfway through his name. He sat up, legs crossed now, facing me fully. "Do you ever think about that kind of stuff? Or am I being weird again?" "Yeah," I whispered. "I think about it all the time." I tried not to look at his mouth. I tried not to look at the way his fingers tapped anxiously against his knee, like he was working up to something, or maybe waiting for me to say something first. I'd imagined this moment before, countless times in too many what-if daydreams that always ended before they got too close. But now that it was real, I didn't know what to do with it. I was scared. Scared of misreading him. Scared of ruining something that had meant the world to me since I was 8. But I was more scared of never knowing. "Mike," I hesitated, then said it anyway. "Can I ask you something and you promise not to make a joke out of it?" He blinked, his smile fading into something more serious. "Yeah, promise." "When you said the hoodie smelled like me, what did you mean?" He was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your chest ache. Then slowly he said, "I meant it was comforting, like you, familiar, safe, and maybe a little dangerous too in a way I can't explain." He looked at me then, not teasing, not playful, just honest. "Is that okay?" he asked. I couldn't speak, so I nodded. He reached out, not touching me yet, but close enough that I could feel it like static. His hand hovered just beside mine on the bed. "If I asked to stay up here with you, would that be okay too?" My breath hitched. "You already are," I whispered. Then his fingers brushed mine, slowly, carefully, like he was waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. We didn't speak for a while after our fingers touched. But neither of us moved away. Michael's hand slowly curled beside mine, close enough to feel each shift of his knuckles, every flicker of hesitation in the way he breathed. My heart thundered so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The rain softened into a hush outside, as if the world itself were leaning in, holding its breath for what might come next. "I'm not sure when it changed," I finally said, voice low. barely audible over the gentle tapping at the window. When just being around you stopped feeling the same. He didn't respond right away. Just turned his hand so his palm faced mine, waiting. I used to think, I continued, that it was just nostalgia. You know, missing the past, missing the version of us that had sleepovers and shared comics and didn't have to think so damn hard about everything. My thumb grazed the side of his, slow and deliberate. But then you'd do something, like smile at me a certain way, or say my name like it actually meant something. And I'd realize, it's not nostalgia, it's now. I swallowed hard. And it's terrifying. Michael exhaled shakily, almost like he'd been holding it all in. He shifted, turning to fully face me. His knees bumped into mine and he didn't move them, away this time. The dim light from my phone, still glowing faintly on the nightstand, cast half his face in shadow. "You think you're the only one who's terrified?" he asked softly. "Because I've been walking around with this knot in my chest for months. Years, maybe." I looked up. His voice cracked when he said that last word, and something in me cracked with it. "You never said anything," I whispered. "Neither did you." We stared at each other. Too many words between us and not enough time to say them all. "I didn't want to ruin it," I admitted. "You've always been everything. My best friend, my constant. I didn't want to risk that by saying the wrong thing." Michael gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Yeah, same. Except I kept waiting for you to say anything. Just one sign. And sometimes I thought I saw it. Like tonight, when you offered me your hoodie, or when our hands touched, or when you looked at me like—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. But I kept second-guessing, wondering if I made it up in my head. "You didn't," I said, louder than I meant to. "You didn't make it up." There was a long pause. Michael reached for my hand, this time more boldly, more certainly, and laced his fingers with mine. The warmth of his palm made my stomach twist in that dizzy, hopeful way I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. He let out a breath. "I think I've loved you for longer than I even realized. I just didn't have the language for it until I wasn't sleeping next to you at night, or hearing you complain about cold coffee, or seeing you label your stupid mugs." I laughed through a rush of emotion. "They're not stupid." "They're very stupid," he said, gently, teasingly, then sobered. "But they're yours, and I love them because of that." I didn't realize I was crying until he reached out with his other hand and wiped under my eye with his thumb. The touch was careful, tender. His fingers lingered at my cheek, and he held them there, like he wasn't ready to let go. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. My voice was shaking. "We wasted so much time." "I was scared," he said simply. "You're the one person I can't lose." The silence after that felt different. Heavier, but also somehow lighter. Like all the weight we'd both been carrying had finally been laid out in the open. Ugly and vulnerable and real. I leaned into his touch. Without meaning to, eyes fluttering shut. "You're not going to lose me." When I opened them again, he was already watching me. His hand moved from my cheek to the back of my neck, fingers grazing the edge of my hairline like he was testing the water, waiting for any sign that he should stop. I didn't stop him. He leaned in, slowly, cautiously, and our foreheads touched first. Just that, and already my breath caught. I could smell his shampoo, the faint citrus from my hoodie, the warmth of him wrapped around me like a familiar, worn-in memory. "I want to kiss you," he whispered, the words trembling. "But I don't want to screw this up. I can't screw this up." "You won't," I whispered back. "Just don't stop." That was all it took. He closed the final distance between us, and our lips met. Tentative at first, like we were still unsure of what we were allowed to feel. But then he kissed me again, deeper, slower, his hand cradling my jaw like I might vanish if he let go. I kissed him back like I'd been waiting years for it. Because I had. Everything else fell away. The storm, the flickering light, the nervous pit in my chest. All that remained was the warmth of him, the reality of his mouth on mine, and the unspoken promise carried in every soft press of his lips. I'm here. I've always been here. When we finally broke apart, neither of us moved. Faw, his forehead pressed against mine again, breath mingling, both of us still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of it all. I can't believe we're doing this, he murmured. Me either, I said, smiling through the tears I hadn't wiped away yet. But also, I kinda can. It always felt like it was supposed to be this. He nodded, brushing his thumb over my cheek again. Yeah, me too. We lay back together on the bed, still holding hands, our bodies closer than they'd ever been. His head tilted toward mine on the pillow, the side of his knee resting softly against mine. We didn't speak right away. We didn't need to. The silence this time wasn't heavy or afraid. It was peaceful. Comforting. Safe. He squeezed my hand once, gently. So, where do we go from here? I turned my head to look at him. Wherever we want. He grinned, wide and bright and unguarded, and leaned in to press the lightest kiss to the tip of my nose. Okay, he whispered. Then let's start right here. The rain had softened to a lazy drizzle by the time we finally let ourselves breathe again. Michael was lying beside me on the bed, one arm under his head, the other still loosely, draped across my waist. The comforter had gotten tangled somewhere around our knees, but neither of us cared. I could feel the steady rise and fall of his chest next to mine, the warmth of his body grounding me like nothing else ever had. I feel like I just ran a marathon, I said quietly, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Emotionally or physically? He asked, his voice low, laced with that familiar teasing tone. I smiled. Emotionally. Unless you're hiding some Olympic sprinting from me I don't know about. He laughed, a soft puff of air against my neck. Nah, I've just been holding that confession in so long it came out like a flood. Sorry if I drowned you. You didn't, I said, turning to face him. You saved me. Michael blinked. That teasing spark in his eyes softened, replaced, with something that looked dangerously close to awe. That's... wow. Okay, gonna have to sit with that one for a second. I nudged his side with my elbow. You don't have to say anything profound. I just mean, this, you. It feels like coming home. You're gonna make me cry again, he warned with a wobbly smile. Join the club. We lay there in silence for a bit, the kind that didn't need to be filled. He reached over and brushed his knuckles along my cheekbone, then let his hand fall to rest on my chest, right over my heartbeat. I always wondered, he said, what it would feel like if this ever happened. If we stopped dancing around it. But this? It's better than anything I imagined. Yeah? I asked, eyes fluttering closed at the feeling of his thumb tracing idle patterns over my shirt. He nodded. Yeah, and also, terrifying, remember? I chuckled. Still scared? A little, he admitted. But it's the kind of scared that means something matters. Like, if we're going to do this, I don't want it to be half-assed. I don't want to be a secret or a fling or just something we tried and gave up on when it got complicated. It will get complicated, I said honestly. We live in different cities. You've got your job, I've got mine. There's a lot. I know, he said. But none of that changes how I feel about you. And if we have to figure it out step by step, I'm okay with that. As long as we're figuring it out together. He shifted closer, nudging his forehead against mine again. We've already done the hard part. We told the truth. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was still holding. God, we really did, didn't we? He grinned. And look, we didn't even combust. I mean, the power did go out. Michael laughed, burying his face in my shoulder. Okay, fine. Maybe the universe short-circuited a little. We stayed wrapped around each other, legs tangled beneath the covers. It was surreal, how quickly we'd gone from years of silence to this easy, physical closeness. But it didn't feel forced. It felt like something we'd both been ready for, even if we didn't know it. What happens now? I asked softly, fingers brushing along the inside of his wrist. He shrugged, but his voice was sure. Now, I start staying over more often. We talk about plans, we visit each other, and maybe, someday, I stop being the guest on your couch and become something a little more permanent. You planning on moving in already? I teased, raising an eyebrow. Only if I get my own labeled mug. I laughed, then pulled him closer. Deal. He kissed the corner of my mouth, light and playful. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. And just like that, I knew we were beginning something real. Something that might not be perfect, might not be easy, but would be ours. The next morning, everything was still. The storm had passed, leaving behind dew-dampened trees and the crisp scent of pine and wet earth drifting in through the cracked window. Early sunlight filtered in soft golden lines across the floorboards, illuminating the mess we'd made, scattered socks, crumpled blankets, and one abandoned pillow that had somehow ended up beneath the desk. Michael was still asleep beside me, his hair tousled, mouth slightly parted, one arm slung lazily over my stomach. I stayed still, not wanting to wake him, just watching. Something had shifted. There was peace in the silence now, where once there would have been tension or too loud laughter to fill the gaps. There was closeness that felt natural, like we'd always known the space between us was meant to be this small. I let my hand move, carefully up to his. His fingers curled in reflex, even in sleep, lacing through mine. There it was again. Simple, but grounding. We didn't need grand gestures. This was ours. He stirred a little, brow twitching, and his eyes cracked open, squinting at the morning light. Is it weird if I say I like waking up next to you more than coffee? He mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said, I whispered back, grinning. He blinked up at me and smiled lazily. Then I'll save the proposal until after breakfast. My breath caught, but he winked before I could say anything, already rolling over onto his back, stretching like a cat. I laughed, my cheeks still warm. You're a menace. A menace who finally kissed you. He shot back, eyes crinkling. So I think I'm winning. We stayed in bed for a while longer, letting the quiet morning settle around us like a second blanket. Eventually, hunger nudged us out from under the covers, and we stumbled into the kitchen, me in my sweats, him still wearing my hoodie, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He made pancakes. I burned the coffee. You would mess up the one thing you claim to love most, he teased, swiping batter off the counter with his finger and flicking it at me. I retaliated with a spoonful of flour and a kiss on the cheek. When we sat down to eat, the silence between bites wasn't awkward like it might have been once. It was easy, comfortable, a shared rhythm. Michael looked up after finishing his second pancake and nudged something across the table with his knuckle. It was a mug. My spare, the one that used to be blank. Only now, written in black marker across the side, in his familiar handwriting, were the words, Michael's. Yes, I'm staying. I stared at it for a moment, then laughed, then felt something squeeze in my chest like joy, and something deeper. Permanent marker? I asked. He nodded, biting his lip like he couldn't stop smiling. Unless you want me to use something more dramatic, like a tattoo. You're ridiculous, I said. But I'm yours, he replied. Simple, true. And it hit me all over. Again, how long I'd waited for this. Not just the confession, or the kiss, or even the nights like this one, tangled up in soft mornings and playful jabs. I'd waited for the knowing, the mutual open certainty that we belonged to something more than just the past, something forward-facing, something real. I reached across the table, fingers curling around the mug, and then around his hand. No. Take-backs, I said. He leaned in, forehead nearly touching mine. Wouldn't dream of it. Outside, the world was waking up. Birds flitted through damp branches. The wind carried the scent of something fresh, something possible. And in that quiet kitchen, with pancakes cooling on our plates and fingers still entwined over a ridiculous mug, I knew this was just the beginning of us.